One of the big advantages of watching the CFL is that there are only 9 teams. In theory, you could watch every single game in the regular season, unlike other leagues like the MLB, where there can be more than 10 games on any given day. But let's say you're not that committed yet. I just want one team that I can follow and know about, and from watching their games, I'll learn about the rest of the league. Well, my honest advice is to watch any game you can and see yourself naturally gravitate toward one team. But even if you choose that route, gravitation might be easier if you have some background knowledge on the teams. So let's talk about them, and specifically what they have going for them in 2025. I'll be putting the teams in a rough order from which ones could probably use some more fans, to which ones have more than enough. The Toronto Argonauts are the oldest professional North American sports team, operating under the same name. Founded in 1873, they were originally a rowing club, whose players stayed in shape in the fall by playing football, hence the nautical theme. They have easily the most Grey Cup wins at 19, and have not lost a Grey Cup they've appeared in since 1987. Now you might wonder why a big city like Toronto would be needing fans more than the other teams. The reason is because Toronto just has so darn much going on that the Argonauts, despite being ranked most affordable sporting event in Toronto given the product, have consistently the worst attendance in the league despite being one of the best teams recently. That being said, their fan base is very passionate, especially in the rivalry with Hamilton, who they face off against in the traditional Labor Day Classic. Since COVID cancelled the 2020 season, the Argonauts have been borderline unstoppable under coach Ryan Dinwiddie, unexpectedly winning 2 Grey Cups and even going 16-2 for the first time. For 2025, no one is really expecting them to suddenly get worse, as their star quarterback Chad Kelly remains at the helms, and many of the same people are sticking around. One thing Toronto is great at is pick sixes. It feels like every other game I go to as an Argonauts fan has a pick six at some point. In last year's East semifinal, they had 2 pick sixes in the span of less than a minute. If you like a good running game, this year they will be absolutely stacked at running back, with both Kadeem Carey and the newly signed Kevin Brown at that position. These are both incredible players who should be fun to watch this year, as the team looks for its 20th Grey Cup win. The Edmonton Elks were founded as the Eskimos in 1949, but changed their name in 2021. Since this name change, they have been ridiculously embarrassing to watch, setting a professional sports record for most consecutive home losses at 22. This is a big contrast to the Edmonton teams of yore who were so good that they won 5 straight Grey Cups. As you can imagine, their attendance after the name change absolutely tanked to embarrassingly low levels, hence their place on this list. It also doesn't help that their stadium is Olympic-sized, making the crowds seem even smaller than they actually are. Thankfully, they fired their head coach Chris Jones after a game against Ottawa in 2024 that I'll encourage you to watch, link in the description. Jones at the time was probably the most hated man in the CFL, making tons of dumb blunders and insisting that demonstrably bad players were actually good. This year, the big story is that they are starting Canadian quarterback Trey Ford, known for his passing abilities, but especially his running abilities. Trey has started every once in a while since 2022, and often wins, leaving many fans angry at the organization for not fully trusting in his abilities. Even though they are starting him in 2025, they also signed veteran quarterback Cody Fajardo to be their backup, which to many seems like the Elks still don't fully believe in Ford. Exactly how they will use both of these players is not super clear, but the bottom line is that they want to make it into the playoffs again, having never made it under their existing name. If you like rivalries, they have a long-standing one with the other Alberta team, the Calgary Stampeders, who there is an annually scheduled Labor Day Classic against. Next up, we have the Ottawa Red Blacks. Ottawa these days is basically like what Edmonton wants to be, except that Ottawa's bad period was not 4 years, but rather 40 years. Ottawa's original team, the Rough Riders, were founded in the 1870s, but beginning in the late 1970s, the team was totally on the decline, with terrible owners, terrible coaches, and subpar teams. Ottawa got so bad that they folded in 1996, tried to come back in 2002, folded after 2005, and then finally came back in 2014 as the Red Blacks. After a Grey Cup win and 2 other appearances, they went back to their horrendous ways starting in 2019, but finally became a winning team again in 2024 under the leadership of quarterback Drew Brown and head coach Bobby Dice. Attendance went up again, though still being low, but more importantly, they made it back into the playoffs. If there are two things Ottawa's good at, it's these. Firstly, making unpredictable comebacks, like this famous one where they were down 25-9 with less than 3 minutes left, and yet won 31-28. The second thing they're good at is giving up comebacks in games they should have won easily, like here when they were up 37-21 and conceded 20 points in 2 minutes. But who knows? This could be totally different in 2025. The big story this year is that they signed arguably the best CFL receiver of the 2020s, Eugene Lewis, who will hopefully electrify Ottawa's offense to lead them to the playoffs for another year. The Red Blacks have a sort of lumberjack theme going on, lots of flannel and plaid, and they have a soft but pronounced rivalry with Montreal, partially because they are the only teams with a decent-sized francophone fan base. Their rivalry game is on Thanksgiving Monday in Montreal. The next team on the list is the Calgary Stampeders. The Stampeders are in a similar place as the Elks in terms of why their attendance is lower, except with no name change. The Stampeders were an absolute beast of a team in the mid-2010s under quarterback Bo Levi Mitchell, even winning a game 60-1. After COVID, the team started fairly strong, but slowly declined after reorienting themselves around a new quarterback named Jake Maier. They only made the playoffs in 2023 because Edmonton and Saskatchewan didn't, and then in 2024 were the only team to finish with less than 7 wins. Luckily, they signed maybe the best active quarterback who has yet to win a Grey Cup, Vernon Adams. Vernon Adams absolutely transformed both of his past two teams, the Montreal Alouettes and the BC Lions. These teams were among the worst before 2020, but his insanely accurate deep balls and great awareness in the pocket were successful in changing his team's records. And as you can imagine, that also helped attendances. So Calgary is hoping that he'll continue to do that, but for them this time. As mentioned before, their main rival is Edmonton, and they are starting a new tradition this year of having a game against Winnipeg called the Stampede Bowl that takes place before the annual Calgary Stampede Rodeo. They also have a tradition of bringing their horse into the lobby of a hotel whenever the Grey Cup happens, and would also be delighted to remind you that they are the only CFL team with a perfect season in 1948. In 2023, I heard this joke about the Tiger Cats. Wow, I'm so happy the oldest sports team, the Argonauts, is celebrating their 150th anniversary. Reminds me of when the Tiger Cats did that 4 years ago. The reason why Toronto has to insert that operating under the same name bit into their claim to fame is because the Hamilton Tigers were founded in 1869, so they're technically older, but only became the Tiger Cats when they merged with the team called the Wildcats in 1950. Now, if you're not from Canada, you may not have even known that there was a city in Canada called Hamilton, and having been there myself, I wouldn't really blame you. Hamilton is this industrial city with around 600,000 people just down the lake from Toronto. It's very working class. In fact, many of the houses around their stadium were built specifically for people employed by Hamilton's big steel mill. Now, hang on a minute. Steel Town and their colors are yellow and black? Yeah, Pittsburgh isn't the only one. And if you're a Steelers fan, I'd consider supporting Hamilton. While they are great at winning Labor Day games against the rival upper-class, shiny, famous Argonauts, one department in which they really need to step up their game is the Grey Cup wins. Hamilton has not won the Grey Cup since 1999. 2025 could possibly be the year. They have the aforementioned Bo Levi Mitchell, who in 2024 threw for more passing yards than Joe Burrow in the NFL. But they did miss the playoffs because their defense was not exceptional in the slightest. Hamilton could really go in any direction this year. They did make some moves, like signing former Argos halfback Deshaun Amos, but overall, they are probably one of the bigger wild cards going into 2025. Next up, we have the Montreal Alouettes. Montreal is a very popular choice for American fans to support, especially because the fact that their primary language is French makes it feel a little more exotic and distinct. The big story about Montreal recently is how they unexpectedly won the 2023 Grey Cup. Before that season started, it wasn't even entirely clear who their owner was going to be, and with their quarterback Trevor Harris gone, they were ranked 9th in the power rankings. However, under Cody Fajardo, who I talked about in the Edmonton section, and especially thanks to their defense, they somehow managed to beat the 16-2 Argonauts in the 2023 East Final, and then won the Grey Cup with 13 seconds left. It was a huge success, and popularity for the team skyrocketed in 2024. Unfortunately, they play in a very small stadium that they do often sell out, but it's not really comparable to a sellout in a bigger stadium where there are 10 to 20,000 more seats. Now, if there's one thing the rest of the league associates Montreal with, it's Le Honk, or the air horns that fans bring to their games.
This one from 37 yards away.
These air horns originated with a few elderly fans in one section of Percival Molson Stadium that everyone just kind of tolerated. But eventually people on Twitter started talking about how annoying they found them, to the point where it's become a real discussion and the team has considered banning them. But it's such an iconic tradition at this point that seems counterproductive to eliminate. Also, I should mention that right beside the stadium is a brain healthcare place where people recovering from concussions can watch football from their window. Exactly how they'll do in 2025 is unclear. Backup quarterback Davis Alexander is now their starter, and he's shown some potential, but has never played too many games in a row. They are pretty great at special teams, though, with global player Jose Maltos kicking field goals, and in my opinion the most underrated CFL player right now, James Letcher, returning kicks. Following the Alouettes, we have the BC Lions. As you could tell, most teams see a regeneration of fan support whenever they start doing well. While it is true for BC, their success is more often credited to their new owner, Amar Doman. Amar, unlike some other team owners, cough cough Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, has shown genuine interest in making the Lions the best sporting event in Vancouver. For example, he thought about how 7 o'clock games aren't great for fans who live on Vancouver Island and have to take a ferry back home at 11 p.m. So he asked the league to give them more 4 o'clock games to make this more feasible. They listened. He also invited 50 Cent to perform at a game that in turn saw 53,000 fans attend, and a similar concert is planned for this year. Now, in terms of fan culture, the Lions don't really have a rival. In a league with an odd number of teams, there has to be one left out. Sure, the other West teams who they are competing for playoff spots with are rivals enough, but who that is changes every season. The big thing the Lions are proud about is that their quarterback Nathan Rourke is from BC, and he is amazing to watch. You may have seen this highlight of him when he briefly played for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Rourke, swarmed, stays on his feet somehow, will have a chance to get it away, and he completes it for a touchdown.
Anyway, much of the pressure is on Rourke whenever they lose. In fact, the only reason the Lions signed Vernon Adams in 2022 was because of how bad they got after losing Rourke to injury. Beside him, they also have the most accurate kicker in CFL history, Sean White, who is only slightly behind Justin Tucker for most accurate in pro football history. Like Hamilton, they want to win badly this year, but it's not clear if having a talented quarterback will be enough to get them there. Now, I think I'm about to become enemies with every person in Saskatchewan because I am saying that they have the second least need for new fans. Saskatchewan has had a reputation for being CFL fans central for most of its modern existence, mostly because the NHL, MLB, and NBA do not have any teams there. They make helmets out of watermelons and sell more merchandise than any other team. Their games regularly sell out. Their attendance hovers around 27,000 per game. However, this fan support makes up for something that they are not good at, winning Grey Cups. Since 1910, that's 115 years ago, they have won a whopping 4 Grey Cups. That's it. So basically, if you decide to follow them this year and they win, consider yourself a good luck charm. The province will likely go crazy because everyone, regardless of how much they know about the team, views them as integral to the identity of Saskatchewan culture. Unfortunately, 2024 in particular saw a lot more empty seats than usual, even though they did make it back to the playoffs after a 2-year absence. It'll be interesting to see if the fans bounce back this year. I'm optimistic that they will. The Riders have great players like Roland Milligan on defense, Kean Schaefer-Baker at receiver, and their superstar kick returner, Mario Alford. However, their quarterback Trevor Harris, while good, is getting pretty old and prone to injury, and even openly said that he was okay with the team letting him go if they thought that younger talent would be more effective at putting them in the win column. No matter who's playing, any Riders game is a great time with friendly fans. And probably the team that is in the least need of more fans is Winnipeg. Winnipeg and Saskatchewan are rivals. In the 2000s, they even created a new rivalry game on top of the Labor Day Classic between them called the Banjo Bowl after Winnipeg's kicker said the Rough Rider fans were just a bunch of banjo-picking inbreds. While the Riders might have a more established fan culture, the Bombers have quietly overtaken the Rough Riders for the actual highest number of fans, getting over 30,000 for plenty of games, even ones against East teams who they don't really have any sort of rivalry with. Why is this, you ask? because they're basically like the Kansas City Chiefs of the CFL. Their Patrick Mahomes is a guy named Zach Collaros, who has just constantly outperformed himself. The Bombers' coach, Mike O'Shea, is incredible at identifying where his team needs to be making adjustments. Look at their 2024 season, for example. They started 0-4, but finished first in the West. Now here's the crazy part. The Bombers have appeared in the past 5 Grey Cups. They won the first 2 against very good Hamilton teams, but then got upset 3 times in a row by not quite as good Toronto and Montreal teams. While the rest of the league sits around and wonders how Winnipeg could possibly blow those games, their fans are continuing to show up. The downside is that the Zach Collaros era is coming to an end soon, because he's getting kind of old. Which might be why they drafted star Canadian University quarterback Taylor Elgersma this past April. Whether or not Elgersma is the path they go with is not definitive, especially because when Collaros retires is up to Collaros. The Bombers are expected to do well going into 2025, but even if they don't, I'd still bet that their attendance will continue to be at these high levels. So I hope that gave you some basic information on the culture of the various fan bases and the identity of the teams. Many people don't really know where to start when interacting with the CFL, and that's what I try to help with on this channel. Preseason kicks off on Monday, May 19th with a neutral site game in Langford, BC that can be watched on CFL+, which is just a link to a live stream on CFL.ca. The regular season begins on Thursday, June 5th between the Red Blacks and Rough Riders, and to be honest, I have the sense that it's going to be a really close game. If you live in America, that game will most likely be shown on CBS Sports Network, and in Canada, all of the games are on TSN, with a few on CTV in the fall. In the description, I'll link to one recent home game for each team that is worth watching in full if you're interested in supporting them. If you know of anyone else who you think could use the information in this video, don't hesitate to send it their way. I'm confident that the CFL has a fan base right for you.